Okay. All right. Let's get started. Welcome to the webinar From ADHD to AuDHD, Exploring Neurodivergence and Identity. So as I said before, this will be recorded. So if you want to keep your camera off, you can. If you want to pop in the chat and say something, or you can turn on your camera or your audio and kind of shed out some answers. I like these to be as interactive as possible. So an Indigenous land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that I am located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape, and Chondarand nations on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. As somebody who is Métis, this is something that is very important to me and not just kind of something to be done. And I feel it's important to acknowledge kind of the land that we are on. So, introduction. Were you recently diagnosed with ADHD and feel like something is still missing? You can let me know in the comments or feel free to speak up. So I was diagnosed with ADHD, and initially I felt like that explained a lot. But over time, I realized that there were still some missing pieces, things that the ADHD diagnosis didn't fully explain. And as I learned more about neurodivergence and researched it, Rebecca, yes, I realized that I was also autistic, which led me on an even deeper journey into what it means to be AuDHD. So this webinar will explore the overlap between ADHD and autism, provide strategies for navigating these experiences, and offer insight into overcoming imposter syndrome and how to advocate for yourself. So there's a reason you registered for this event. Can you please type into the chat one thing you hope to learn or gain from the webinar? And I talk a mile a minute, so that is both my nervousness from presenting and also my ADHD. I just talk a mile a minute. Okay, move on. So first section, understanding ADHD, autism, and AuDHD. So this is very brief. You like to, when overlapping ADHD and autism have diverging needs? Yes, that is hard to know for sure. Any information that can help fill potential gaps. Awesome, love that. So I'll also want to make sure I'm not missing anybody that maybe wants to come in. So, okay, perfect. All right. Hear about my experience, learn more about adult presentation, difference between ADHD and autism, and yes, formal diagnosis pathways maybe. Okay. Formal diagnosis for autism pathways and supports for adults. All right, awesome. Okay, so introduction to ADHD. So this little person here, that is the official ADHD symbol of ADHD, which I think is awesome, a rainbow butterfly. I actually have a little kind of clip on my socials about why I think this is very appropriate. So just to kind of give you a little bit a brief explanation for ADHD. It is a neurodevelopmental condition often showing signs beginning in early childhood with a strong genetic basis. It affects brain regions that manage emotions, attention, and control. So some key characteristics are difficulty regulating attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. So the three kind of diagnostic classifications are inattentive, hyperactive, impulsive, and combined type, which is both. I am lucky enough to have all three. Yay! Hat trick. So some common symptoms are trouble focusing, staying on task, or following through on projects, distractibility, forgetfulness, and problems with organization, appearing not to listen when spoken to, need for movement, fidgeting, impulsivity, and interrupting others. There are also physical characteristics that commonly occur with ADHD, and this is relatively new, such as skin issues like eczema and psoriasis, gut issues, so in women, endometritis, things like that. Hypermobility. I am tight everywhere, and yet right now, if I want to, I could stand up, bend down, and put both hands on the floor, and I'm 6'2". Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, POTS, and others. So this is kind of relatively new information that's come out in the last kind of few years. So ADHD is present from birth, but may become more noticeable when life demands exceeding coping abilities, such as move away from home, starting post-secondary schooling, or after having children, or hey, a global pandemic. Many individuals have developed strategies to mask symptoms, leading to a diagnosis later in life. ADHD is the most common neurodevelopmental condition in Canada, with prevalence estimates ranging from 5 to 8% in children. However, that being said, the numbers range quite a bit for both children and adults, and there doesn't seem to be agreement on the prevalence of ADHD in the general population, probably due to a number of different factors. So, do any of you relate to these traits? If so, please share an example in the chat, or feel free to speak up.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sorry, what was that?
Can you please repeat the question one more time?
Oh, sorry. Oops, whatever. Yeah. So, can you relate to any of these traits? And if so, please share an example in the chat. Sorry, I think I froze there for a minute. So, however, definitely in and around food. Yes. The comorbidity between ADHD and food, like eating disorders, is very, very high. Definitely. Binge eating, restricting, things of that nature, for sure. Okay. Introduction to autism. And this is one of the newer symbols of autism. That used to be the puzzle piece, although that was found very problematic in the autistic community. So this is something that has been proposed instead. There are some pros and cons to it, but it is better than the puzzle piece because as autistic people, there's nothing wrong with us, or there's no pieces missing. So autism is characterized by persistent differences in social communication, interaction, and behaviors across various contexts. So diagnosis requires meeting criteria across these core areas. So one is social communication interaction differences. So social and emotional reciprocity, challenges in initiating and maintaining conversations, especially outside of areas of interest. My wife tells me all the time, I don't want to hear about mental health anymore. Sorry. Difficulty with small talk, and preference for discussing special interests. Communication may be more fluid when interacting with other autistic individuals or discussing shared interest. Masking behaviors may hide these challenges until either fatigue or stress reveals them, which is why I don't like having conversations with stuff that I'm not interested in late at night because I'm tired. Nonverbal communication. So difficulty understanding and using nonverbal cues, example, body language, facial expressions, tendency for minimal eye contact. I don't have an issue with eye contact, but when I'm tired, I'm stressed out, or I'm really kind of emotional, I find that my eyes start to wander all over, and I struggle with looking directly at a person. So just as an example. And fragmented alignment between verbal and nonverbal expressions. Yep. Understanding relationships. So difficulty adapting behavior across different contexts. So example, school versus social settings, challenges in developing and maintaining friendships, and struggles with shared activities requiring reciprocal interaction. So like teamwork. Criteria B is restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. So routines and resistance to change. Need for predictability and routines with distress arising from unexpected changes or disruptions. Repetitive behaviors like simming, echolalia, and creating collections or organizational systems for self-soothing. Fixated interests, deep, intense focus on specific topics or hobbies, often becoming a key part of identity. Interest intensity is notable even if the topics seem socially typical. Hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input, example, sensitivity to light, sound, or textures, or strong interest in sensory experiences. So traits appear in early childhood, but may become more visible when social or cognitive demands increase. So many autistic individuals use masking strategies which can delay diagnosis. So that's kind of a very brief overview of autism. So I want you to think about times that you've ever felt overwhelmed by sensory input or social interactions. And if you're comfortable, kind of share your experience and how you managed in the chat. or speak out loud.
I think that my biggest thing with my sort of sensory overload, I'm very fortunate to have had access to like a good amount of therapy, and the breathing really does help me when I'm in a space that I can be regulated. When I'm not, I definitely am one to just completely isolate because sometimes it's just that's my limit. So it's a pretty hard, like I can control it when it's not too bad, but once it's to that level, I got nothing.
Yeah, that's fair. Amber said that she manages by isolating, including living solo rurally. Yeah, definitely. Controlling your environment is a big piece. It really is. Francis said largely when there's too many things competing, too hot or cold, there's background noise, can't tune out, too many people are talking, the lights are too bright. Yeah, definitely. Most family get-togethers or events that you go to are overwhelming, often wear earplugs or sunglasses. Yes, definitely. I started wearing kind of over-the-ear headphones. I also started, I have AirPods, the ones that are noise canceling. Absolutely love them. I cannot use loop earplugs, but my daughter uses them. So at least they're not going to waste. So yeah, these are all great examples. So the overlap of ADHD and autism. And ADHD and autism co-occur at higher rates than is seen within the general population. So the high rate of co-occurrence creates a paradox. On the one hand, they appear as opposite conditions, a need for routine and structure versus excitement seeking and need for adventure. On the other hand, they share many similarities, making it difficult to tease them apart. So Dr. Megan Neff created what's called Misdiagnosis Monday. She is a psychologist. Yeah, you can take screenshots of the content. A recording of this will be sent out as well, so don't worry about that. And so she created a whole series, and she is a psychologist that is AuDHD as well. So if we're going to kind of look at this, right? On the one hand, ADHD seeks novelty, attention regulation, difficulty with social cues, interest-based system, hyperactivity, impulsivity. Autism seeks familiarity, preference for routine, difficulty with holistic social cues, monotropism, and need for verbal context. And even some of these on the side are still very similar, but the reasons are different. But if you look at the overlap, it's huge. Stimming and fidgeting, sensory differences, impulse control, emotional regulation, high rates of substance abuse, suicidality, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, bipolar, OCD, neurodivergent communication patterns, executive functioning, increased rates of victimization, divergent thought patterns. Like there's a lot, right? And neuroimaging and neuropsychology studies show similar genetics, similar executive functions, and similar brain chemistry, brain circuitry involved. And further, they're both considered neurodevelopmental conditions and share familial and genetic links. I only talk for a living. So both groups often struggle with picking up on social cues, but for different reasons, right? So inattention for ADHD, it's inattention and difficulty sustaining focus in conversations, missing social signals due to inattention, distraction during conversations, impulsivity, a tendency to go on tangents. For people with autism, it's intuitively picking up on the difficulty with intuitively picking up on social cues of body language, with understanding subcontext, being a highly literal or visual interpreter of communication, difficulty with multitasking, kind of like social communication involves tracking multiple things at once, experiencing social chit chat as a sensory demand. And the autistic person is more likely to have a high need for autonomy / alone time and may have less social motivation. And so being a highly literal and visual interpreter of communication, when I was younger, I would go over to a friend's house and they'd be like, oh, help yourself to whatever you want in the fridge. And I would, and they would get mad at me. I'd be like, well, what do you mean? You said to literally help myself to anything. Like, well, no, you should have known not to take this. And I was like, well, how was I supposed to know that? To me, you said anything. So that literally means anything. And it took me a long time to understand that they didn't actually mean anything. It was just a social nicety. It blew my mind when I figured that out, right? So another one would be hyperfocus and special interest. So ADHDers and autistics share the ability to intensely focus on areas of passion and show commitment to areas of interest. So within kind of the clinical language, it's often referred to as a hyperfocus for ADHD and a hyperfixation, or like a special interest for autism. In this sense, interest-based nervous systems are common among both ADHDers and autistic people. However, hyperfocus is seen in the context of ADHD can look like hyperfixation, and ADHD passions can look like autistic special interests and vice versa. However, ADHDers tend to shift between their passions more frequently or jump from one to another. In contrast, the autistic person is more inclined to have a more enduring special interest. So for me, I was like, oh, I thought I liked all these different things. And really what it is I have an interest in a lot of different things, but I kind of keep coming back to some very specific things. So like fantasy, I've loved fantasy since I was a child. I've been into mental health, my whole life. I got into running in a really big way, and I keep coming back to it. I got into kind of boxing, kickboxing in a really big way, and then left it, and then came back, and left it, and came back. So there are certain things that's like I do go to, and I leave, and then I come back. There's other things that have just been a part of my life, my entire life, right? So that's kind of the bit of the push-pull of AuDHD, which I'll get into. Have you ever felt like your ADHD diagnosis didn't explain everything? So, feel free to share some of your experiences or questions about these overlaps. Okay. All right, then we will move on. So, what is AuDHD? So it's the coexistence of ADHD and autism, kind of creating a unique push-pull dynamic. So, ADHD kind of often drives a need for novelty and stimulation, while autism creates a need for routine and predictability. And research shows that up to 80% of autistics also have ADHD. And kind of goes not the same for ADHD having autism, but it's pretty high. And so despite being so high, this degree of overlap is actually not very widely known. It's only in the last really kind of couple of years. And this is primarily because before the publication of the 5th edition of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in 2013, there was a rule that individuals couldn't be diagnosed with both autism and ADHD. The decision to exclude co-diagnosis has had a ripple effect. So research before 2013 only studied autism and ADHD in isolation. This means that studies on autistic individuals may be skewed by the fact that many, potentially up to 80%, of study participants could have also had ADHD without knowing. That is huge. That means it's only been like 11 years that we recognize that these are together. So individuals who received a formal diagnosis prior to 2013 may only have one diagnosis, even though they probably fit the diagnostic criteria for both. Many AuDHDers are invalidated because they do not fall into the stereotypical presentations of either autism or ADHD. So, the push-pull of AuDHD. So, we've kind of described a few different ways that it could present. Another example would be social interaction. So ADHD might drive a person to seek social engagement, feel energized by social events, or impulsively agree to plans. Autism might make that same person feel drained in social situations due to sensory sensitivities or difficulties with social cues, leading to a need for solitude afterwards. So, prime example for me is we went to Disney World, about a month or a month and a half ago, and I loved being in the parks. I wanted to go on the rides. I had a lot of fun, and it was absolutely fantastic. That being said, I was also very overwhelmed by the environment. I had headphones on, but I didn't have the noise canceling ones, and it was just too much. Some of the rides were too close, and I had a couple of meltdowns. It was hard. I was out at a pool in the hot tub, and I was talking to this couple, and my wife and my friend were like, "Hey, come over and come over here." And I said, "No, no, I'm here. I'm talking." They're like, "No, like Rob, come here." So I went over. And they're like, "Dude, like that couple didn't want to interact with you at all." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "Yeah, the body language was just like were not interested at all." And I was like, "Well, they either could have left or they could have said something." It's like I wanted to be social, I wanted to be out there, but I would just completely just non-recognized the the social cues, right? So have any of you experienced this tension in social settings, and how did you manage it? So let me know through the poll or through the chat, or you kind of just speak up. Sorry, did folks hear me? Did I get frozen? Okay. Bye. Thank you for coming out. Anybody else? Can somebody? No? Okay. So routine. Danielle said, look forward to watching the rest and enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thank you for coming. So routine versus spontaneity. So, ADHD may push for spontaneity while autism kind of pulls for routine, causing distress when plans change. So it might lead, somebody to jump from task to task or starting projects impulsively, seeking the excitement of novelty. Integrating into social situations like parties and large gatherings, low small talk. Yes, exactly. Right. I like being around people. I like, kind of being at parties. Sometimes I'm the life of the party. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to interact with people. I'm very kind of like just kind of keeps to myself. To go back, autism might cause distress when the established routine is broken, leading to a need for order and predictability to feel secure. I always thought I didn't like routine. In schedules, I was like, no, I hate these. Like, and I didn't realize that when I started to be able to manage my ADHD, I actually quite enjoy routine and structure. It brings me a really big kind of sense of comfort. I struggle with it very, very much. But it is something that I find that I actually really, really enjoy. And I didn't think that I did because my ADHD was so prevalent, and was such a kind of a big part of my of kind of my day to day. And so when I was able to kind of learn to cope and manage with my ADHD, my kind of more artistic pieces came out. And I find that um, when I'm tired or I'm overwhelmed, is kind of especially on the ADHD side, um, I find I have to find comfort in the autistic side of like routine and structure, even though it's something I struggle with. So, managing transitions, transitions or changes in routine can be particularly challenging for individuals with ADHD because the ADHD side may want variety while the autistic side resists the change. And this internal conflict can create feelings of frustration, overwhelm, or even shutdown. So I want you to think of a time when you struggled with the change in routine, and what was a strategy that worked for you? Seeking clarity, understanding why the change was necessary. Yes, that is a big one. Um, especially when we're not the ones that have made the change. So, an example, we were at a Disney and we were going to go back to the resorts and we were going to go to the pool. The agreement was we're going to go back to the resort, we're going to relax, we're going to go to the pool, hang out, and then come back and then get ready and go to the park. So that's what I did. That's what me and my daughter did. And then the family that we were traveling with, they decided to go and grab something to eat. And I was like, well, we were hungry too. And we were like, well, my understanding was that we were going to get something in the park because that was the agreement, was that we would, come back, we would go swimming, we'd chill, and then we would go back to the park. And they changed it up and didn't tell us that until kind of after the fact. And then I got really, really upset because I was like, well, why didn't we talk about this? Why weren't we told ahead of time? Like, you were the ones that wanted to change it, and I'm the one that's kind of caught off guard. So that was really frustrating. I got really, really kind of upset about that. So understanding when or why something needs to change can be helpful. So some strategies for switching tasks, managing interruptions, and returning to focus. Yeah, definitely attending to basic needs like eating and sleeping count as interruptions. Yes, when we get really into something, it can be hard to switch, even when it's something that is beneficial. There was one point where I was working, and I was like focused for like 7 hours. I was like in a flow state. It was amazing. I got out of it, and I was starving. I was so hungry because I didn't want to stop. I just wanted to keep going and kind of hammer it out, which does happen for sure. So some strategies for managing kind of the push-pull dynamic, right? And one of the big ones that I often say to a lot of my clients is make your life neurodivergent friendly. What does that mean? Well, it's going to look different for everybody. Some places you can't unmask. Some places you have to present as neurotypical, kind of follow the general societal rules. But when and where you can unmask and kind of be your authentic self, develop that. What would that look like? So in the next slide, I'm going to kind of go through some tips and tricks, and I invite you to add on to them or to suggest some more of your own. So here are some that I try and use. Self-compassion and acceptance. So the importance of recognizing and validating the internal conflict is a natural part of living with AuDHD. So really try to practice self-compassion, acknowledging that it's okay to feel both the push and the pull simultaneously. Understanding that, it's okay to, give yourself permission to feel these conflicting emotions and finding ways to honor both sides when possible. And what does that mean and what does that look like? And understanding that it's okay to feel conflicted. It's okay to want something, but also realize that that's not what you need in that moment. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, that you're broken. It just means that this is something that your brain does, and it's okay to feel that way. Another part is building a flexible routine. So, creating a flexible routine that balances the need for novelty with the need for structure. So example would be like time blocking. So use time blocking to establish predictable periods for specific activities while allowing for spontaneous moments or flexibility within those blocks. Another one is incorporating special interests. So if possible, incorporate special interests into daily routines while allowing space for kind of ADHD-driven spontaneity. This can provide the structure that autism craves while still engaging the ADHD need for stimulation. Schedule breaks. Allow scheduled time for rest or downtime, recognizing that the ADHD side may feel restless, but the autistic side may need a pause to recharge. Another one would be sensory regulation techniques. So the importance of managing sensory input to reduce overwhelm and balance stimulation levels. So, some examples would be noise canceling headphones, soft lighting, fidget toys, things that you can play with, right? Having something that's soft, clothing that you enjoy, that's not binding. I had throat surgery years ago, and so I really don't like things around my neck. So this has a very loose neck or V-necks, right? So that's kind of a sensory thing for me. Intentional stimulation. So incorporating sensory tools or activities like fidget toys, aromatherapy, physical movements. I really like to go back and forth with my chair. My daughter has a pedal thing at her desk at school. And it looks like they're frozen again. Am I frozen?
Hey, Robert. I can hear you and see you still.
Yep,
Okay.
you seem to be okay.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Fizza said she loves fidget toys and also sometimes need to turn off all technology and lay in a dark room with the lights off and have some incense burning too. Yeah. So I did an event a few weeks ago and over the weekend, and I was interacting with people constantly. And so when we were finished, and we went home, my wife was like, "I'll make dinner. Don't worry about it." She's like, go and just kind of do what you need. And so I went upstairs in our room. I laid on the bed, turned off the lights. I wasn't even on my phone. I just wasn't sleeping. I just literally laid in the dark for like an hour. I just needed that time to, to kind of come back down. So yeah, definitely. Transition management. So, managing transitions between activities, particularly when kind of the ADHD need for variety clashes with the autistic preference for predictability. Using visual schedules or planners to help prepare for upcoming transitions, providing a visual cue for what's next. So literally everything is in my phone. And if I know that there's something that has to be done, I put it in my phone so that I know it's there and that it's not a surprise. It doesn't kind of just come out of nowhere, right? Timers and alarms. So set timers to prepare for a transition, allowing time to mentally and emotionally adjust. Incorporate small familiar rituals or activities, deep breathing, specific song, simple sensory tool that provides comfort during transitions and helps ease the shift from one task to another. Or be like, I'm going to do this thing when I train, not to help the transition, like during it, but like, it's like, okay, I know that I'm making, after dinner, I got to clean up. So when I clean up, I'm going to put on music. So even though I'm not putting on the music to help with the transition, the music is something that helps me mentally to move to that next activity, knowing that that's going to be something I can do to focus on, right? And a really big one is seeking support and community. So, there's so much value in kind of connecting with others who understand the AuDHD experience. So finding a community or support group can offer validation, shared experiences, and strategies for managing kind of the push-pull dynamic. Therapy, counseling can really help you to understand your neurodivergence and help you to create kind of like those personalized strategies because everybody's different. What may work for me may not work for somebody else. So this is a kind of really big thing that I think is really important. Imposter syndrome. What is imposter syndrome? Well, it's the experience of feeling like a fraud, getting the validity of one's experiences or achievements and fearing that others, will find out that you don't truly belong. It's very common in neurodivergent individuals, particularly for those who are self-diagnosed or diagnosed later in life. So why? Well, self-diagnosis and validation. So many people exploring their neurodivergent identity, especially those with limited access to formal diagnosis due to cost or availability, may feel invalidated. They may feel like the lack of an official label can lead to doubts about whether they really belong in the neurodivergent community. Another one is masking and adapting. So, for those who were diagnosed later in life, who have spent years masking autistic traits and or ADHD symptoms to fit into neurotypical environments, the idea of embracing a neurodivergent identity can feel foreign or uncomfortable. This often leads to a sense of not being neurodivergent enough or fear of being seen as an imposter. External stigma. So society's stigma around neurodivergence, such as the belief that everyone is ADHD nowadays, hate that phrase, or the questioning of self-diagnosed individuals kind of further amplifies these feelings of imposter syndrome. Many fear judgment or disbelief from others when they share their diagnosis or self-identification. So, when I realized I was like, oh my God, I'm autistic, the fear of being judged or, like being accused of like clout chasing or like, oh, I'm doing this for, to get clients or whatever, for exploring my autistic traits without a formal diagnosis. And, this really conflicted with my personal, value system of like self-diagnosis is real, is, it's valid. And when somebody comes in and says, oh, I think I may be ADHD or autistic or both, or OCD or whatever, I'm like, that's totally valid. And I'm willing to work with them. And yet here I am feeling like I don't feel like my self-diagnosis is valid and like I need an official diagnosis. I have it for my ADHD. I don't have $2,000 to just drop on an autism diagnosis. And at one point, I think that I will do it, but I'm really trying to kind of embrace that. It's hard. So, has anybody here ever felt that way? And if so, what have you done to move past it, or have you been able to?
I think the imposter syndrome for me shows up in a couple of different ways. One, because I hate the term high functioning, but because I was high functioning, simply because I had no other choice. I had to adapt. And, being a young racialized woman, some of the traits that show up in me are more socially acceptable or even desired traits for folks. Some of it was, am I really getting overwhelmed at this? Is this really something that I can't do now, or I'm struggling with? Those kind of conversations and mentally. And then, the flip side of it was all the systems that I had to have in play so that I was on top of things, so that my work was being done, and always feeling like going to that like social cues and niceties thing, like not getting it, but not getting it at the same time in engagements. So that's kind of how it showed up for me.
Yeah, no, that's I totally understand that. And I really appreciate that you spoke to, being a racialized person, because that's an extra added level that not a lot of people really talk about or explore is, well, what does it mean to be neurodivergent and racialized? Because things that may be socially acceptable in, white people are not allowed or even dangerous in people that are racialized, that are Black or brown, or even male. To be a Black male and to not be able to understand or struggle with social cues can be dangerous. We have so many examples of that. And so, there's something that I think a lot of people don't take into consideration. So thank you for bringing that up and reminding me. So some strategies for overcoming imposter syndrome. Validate your own experience. Trust your lived experience. A formal diagnosis, while helpful, is not always accessible or even necessary to validate your own neurodivergent identity. So, the value of self-diagnosis, especially within marginalized communities or for those who cannot access expensive assessments. So self-diagnosis, when done thoughtfully and based on reliable resources like the work of Megan Neff that we were talking about, or websites like embrace-autism.com, is a valid form of understanding and owning one's identity. I actually did all of the autism assessment tests on embrace-autism.com, and everyone came back being like strong indicator for autism. And for me, that gave me at least somewhat of a peace of mind. Right. So another one is practicing self-compassion. Again, it's a powerful tool against imposter syndrome. It's okay to feel uncertain or conflicted. These are a natural part of exploring your identity. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a friend, a family member, or a client facing similar doubts. So using positive affirmations such as, it's okay to trust my experience, or I deserve to understand and accept myself, regardless of others' opinions, can help with the imposter syndrome. Another piece, like I kind of said before, is build and connect with community. Emphasize the importance of finding and building a community of like-minded individuals who understand the experiences of being neurodivergent, especially those who may have been diagnosed later in life or are self-diagnosed. So, 4, separate fact from feeling. It's normal for feelings of doubt to arise, but it doesn't mean that those feelings are facts. So try to identify the difference between feeling like an imposter and the reality of your situation. So some strategies could be like keeping a journal to document your experiences and reflect on how neurodivergence kind of shows up in everyday life. Using grounding techniques when feeling doubt or invalidation kind of come up. things like that. So, learning to advocate for your needs. So really understanding, accepting your own neurodivergent identity is the first step to effective self-advocacy. So whether formally diagnosed or self-diagnosed, everyone has the right to advocate for their needs and create environments that support their well-being. So here are some tips. In a professional environment, explain how you can advocate for workplace accommodations such as flexible work hours, sensory-friendly spaces, or task management support, example, clear instructions or time blocking strategies, without necessarily having to disclose, oh, I have ADHD, autism, ADHD, whatever. An example would be like, I find that I work best when I wear noise-canceling headphones to reduce sensory input. It helps me focus better on my tasks and manage my energy levels, right? Something like that. You could talk to the symptoms and what you're asking for will help to address that, as opposed to talking about the diagnosis or potential diagnosis, right? Personal relationships, communicating preferences for social interactions, boundaries, and sensory environments to ensure friends and loved ones understand and support your needs. People can't support us if they don't know what it is that we need. So when we know ourselves, we can say, this is what I need, right? The importance of setting boundaries and communicating preferences, to friends and family and partners cannot be emphasized enough, right? It's about being honest about your needs so that you can help build more supportive and understanding relationships. So an example would be, I love to attend events, but sometimes I get overwhelmed by large crowds. So if I say I need a break or to leave early, it's not personal, it's just about managing my energy, right? So stuff like that. So I really encourage you to kind of reclaim and own your neurodivergent identity. Regardless of external validation or societal opinions, easy to say, hard to do, totally get that. It is so important to embrace your traits as strengths rather than deficits, although it's important to understand the challenges as well. So integrating and accepting both ADHD and autistic traits can help participants see themselves more clearly, gain confidence, and develop a stronger sense of self. As you connect these pieces, you're also learning to advocate for yourself more effectively and authentically. And just in the chat, I think to myself, if it's helpful to be in the community, then it is good for me. Also, nothing else has helped me with my challenges, but this has helped immensely. Therefore, it is meaningful and worthwhile regardless what anyone or my own self-criticism says. This helps me manage those feelings. Awesome, love it. Samila said, I reflect on the limitations, particularly structuralized discrimination of the Western medical model, and consider mental health diagnoses to be frames that capture only a part of the totality of a human being. Love that. Consider what differences a diagnosis would make. What would you be doing differently? Might it allow or to be a barrier to access? Are there strategies available to you now that might be useful? Yes, exactly. It is a piece, it is not the whole thing. The advocating for myself can be more difficult than advocating for others. Yes, totally. That is something that's so common kind of across the board, but especially for those with neurodivergencies. It's so much easier to advocate for others than it is ourselves, but it is so important for us to advocate for ourselves as well. So self-advocacy is essential for neurodivergent individuals to create environments where we can thrive. Understanding and embracing one's ADHD and autistic traits enables you to effectively communicate what you need in various contexts. Self-advocacy is an ongoing process that evolves as individuals gain more insight into their neurodivergence and learn how different environments impact themselves. That's something that I'm still learning and growing. Like I was diagnosed with ADHD for like 3 years before I realized that a big part of why I kind of had this lingering anger was just from sensory overwhelm from noise. I didn't realize how much noise just affected me, right? And so now I take that into consideration, right? Everyone's needs are valid, regardless of whether you have a formal diagnosis or a self-identifying. Okay. It takes courage to advocate for yourself, particularly when dealing with external stigma or internal doubts about your own neurodivergence. So really quickly, because I'm just mindful of the time, some practical strategies for self-advocacy. So one, understanding your needs. Try to start gaining clarity on your own needs. Understanding both the ADHD and autistic traits can help you identify areas where you may require support or accommodation. This might include identifying what environments are overwhelming or calming and planning ways to reduce sensory overload. Routine and structure. Recognize the need for routine to manage anxiety while also allowing for flexibility to accommodate spontaneity. We kind of talked about building flexible routines. 2 is communicate assertively. So, it's about learning how to communicate your needs clearly and assertively in different settings, emphasizing, that self-advocacy is about expressing yourself with confidence and self-respect. In a personal environment, you can advocate for workplace accommodations, as kind of talked about before. Personal relationships, importance of setting boundaries and knowing what it is that you need and putting that out there, right? Using tools and resources for self-advocacy. So visual aids and technology, like visual schedules, reminder apps, like smartwatches, AirPods, like headphones, stuff like that, right? Creating a self-advocacy script. So, developing your own script for different scenarios. So it can help reduce anxiety and ensure that you're able to express your needs confidently. I've heard of people, writing out before they go in to see doctors and being like, this is why I think I have, this things. Because in the moment you're like, oh my God, what is it? And you just completely forget, right? So sometimes helping that, having that script can help. Again, building a support network, talked about that. Stuff like that. So I want you to choose one self-advocacy strategy that you plan to implement and kind of share your choice in the chat or sound out. Build support network. Love it. All right. So I just want to say thank you for your courage in exploring these topics. The advocacy script, awesome. You're not alone, and every step you take towards understanding yourself is valuable. Remember that self-advocacy is a journey, one that's made easier by connecting the dots of your own neurodivergent experience and embracing the insights you've gained. With self-compassion and practice, you can confidently navigate your environment and advocate for what you need to thrive. If you'd like to know more or get support, you can book a free 15-minute meet and greet with myself or any of our students. We also have a lot of resources at our website at www.embodiedresilience.ca, and we will be coming out with more information. That is the webinar. If there's any questions, we will be here for a few more minutes. Thank you so much for coming. Somebody said
Nice
build
job,
it.
Robert.
Thank you. Somebody said they had a loss in their circle for the person they go to. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's really unfortunate. Okay. Yeah. Any questions? Anything that's people want to say or questions or thoughts before we close this off?
Hey, Robert, real quick.
Yeah.
I was listening when you were talking about like autism and AU or ADD or ADHD
Yeah.
or was it AU?
AUDHD. So AuDHD. Yep.
So, okay. So you said like it was like 80% of ones that have autism may have.
Have ADHD. Yeah. And I heard something, I've read differing numbers, but for people that have ADHD, I think it's something like 50 to 60% have autism or autistic traits.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we're realizing the comorbidity of the two is very strong.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, looking forward to your next one.
Thank you very much. Thank you for dropping by. Thank you so much. All right, Andrea, Maya, who is here, I'm going to stop the recording.